meeting. As usual, this is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and it will be archived so you can view it afterwards. Would everyone please remember to switch their microphone on before they speak and turn it off when they finish speaking. Apologies for absence. We have one apology from the leader, Nick Rushton, and therefore I'm chairing the meeting today. We'll start with the minutes, which are on pages 3 to 14 of your pack. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of February 2019 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Take on urgent items. I've agreed to accept an urgent item. An exempt report on the Housing Infrastructure Fund bid for the southern section of the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road, following recent correspondence from Melton Borough Council. This is urgent because the latest letter was received after the agenda for this meeting was circulated, and we need to agree a basis for moving forward over the next couple of months. As the report is exempt, the chairman of the Scrutiny Commission was consulted and he's agreed to it being considered. And he's nodded, so I'm happy with that. So if members of the Cabinet are in agreement, we'll take this item at the end of the agenda. Is everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, declarations of interest. I will declare a personal interest in relation to item 5 on the order paper. That's the review of proposals for a unitary structure of local government for Leicestershire. And in relation to the urgent exempt item on the Housing Infrastructure Fund bid for the southern section of Melton Mowbray Distributor Road as a member of Melton Borough Council. And I'm assuming that all members who are also members of district councils will wish to declare a personal interest in agenda item 5 regarding the development of a unitary structure for Leicestershire. So does anyone else have interest in respect of items on the agenda? Mrs. Posnett?
Yes, I have an interest in the last exempt report that we're going to look at, being a member of Melton Borough Council.
Thank you. Mr. Payne?
In addition to item 5, where I'm a dual hatter, I'll also declare a personal interest as a dual hatter of Harbour District Council with regards to item 9.
Yeah. Mr. Shepherd?
Sorry, Chairman. In addition to the item about unitary councils, where I'm double-hatted, a personal interest as a member of Chelmsford Borough Council with reference to a site Farley Way in Quorn on item 9.
Thank you for that. No others? Right, we move now to item 4, which is about the it's a report from the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board Business Development Plan. And I'd welcome James Fox, who I used to work with years ago. He's now involved in this work. And he's from the Safeguarding Board's Business Office, and he's here to present the Adult Safeguarding Board's Business Development Plan. This plan was supported by the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee at its meeting on the 11th of March. So, James, would you like to present the report, and then I'm going to ask Richard Blunt as the lead member to speak. James.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board brings together partners to ensure that adults with care and support needs are safeguarded from neglect and abuse in the counties of Leicestershire and Rutland. The board's led by an independent chair, but we are currently in between chairs and a new chair is being appointed at this time, so hence why I'm presenting this in place of an independent chair. The board produces an annual plan of development work each year, identifying its priorities for safeguarding adults in the current year, and the draft plan is presented to Leicestershire County Council Cabinet today to be noted and for comment. Paragraph 21 on the report outlines those priorities for the coming year, improving multi-agency approaches to having effective multi-agency meetings, to mental capacity, to adult exploitation, and to safeguarding and transitions from childhood to adulthood. The draft plan is appended as well, and as the Chair's mentioned, this was welcomed by the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee earlier in March. The plan will go to the Safeguarding Adults Board on the 25th of April to be agreed. So I would ask on behalf of the Safeguarding Adults Board that Leicestershire County Council Cabinet consider this, note it and make any comment they wish to. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I think all the salient points have been covered by James, so I'm happy to move the recommendation on the Green Order paper.
And Ivan.
I'll second the motion on the Green Order paper.
Okay, the motion has been moved that we note and welcome the report. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much, James. Right, we're now on to item 5, which is the review of proposals for unitary structure for local government for Leicestershire. So the next report represents the findings of the Scrutiny Commission's examination of the County Council's proposals for a unitary structure for local government in Leicestershire and sets out additional comments made by the Member Working Party on unitary structure. So I'd like to welcome Simon Galton, Chairman of the Scrutiny Commission, and he will present the report. For the comment, it's been important to work with others and seek their views, MPs, district councils, business leaders, parish councils and other stakeholders in exploring the options for a unitary structure. And this has taken some time. I would like to thank the Scrutiny Commission for its work in this area in gathering together evidence and issues that it considers the business case should address, and also the Member Working Party for its consideration of these issues. So Simon, if you'd like to present the report, and then I'll ask the Cabinet members for comments.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for asking me to present the report on the unitary structure. We did actually meet 4 times on this, which I think is probably a record. I can only think of one other occasion that would be similar to that. And obviously I'm aware that there are strong views, both for and against a unitary structure, and across the parties as well. So that was the background. And the report attached to Appendix A summarises the Scrutiny Commission's discussions at meetings held 14th of November, 30th of November, 6th of December and 15th of Jan, as well as the discussions at other overview and scrutiny committees during the week commencing the 5th of November. And I'll speak to that report first. And just to be clear, the report does not make any clear recommendations. That really would have been too contentious and too difficult. What we've tried to do is gather evidence and present some findings and conclusions on the way forward. And the issues that we think need to be looked at in the business case should you decide to take that forward. And I've summarised these as follows: the need for a clear vision that's not just focused on the financial case for change, the principle of transition first, and then transformation. And this was made very clear by Baroness Scott when she came to speak to us on the 14th of November. And then, Chairman, greater clarity required around the area committees and the planning, and by that I mean development control, governance arrangements. And there are a number of asks there set out in paragraph 40 to 50 of Appendix A. Greater clarity also on how the service model will work. We heard about centrally managed, locally delivered a few times in our discussions, but I think it would be helpful to see some practical examples. One area that was absolutely highlighted was that if this was going to happen and it would work, there would really be a need for a changing culture of the county council, which would need to start at the top, I think, and go right down in the way that we do our business and work in order to make a unitary authority function and work. And that really was a key that came out, cultural change within the organisation. We think that there would need to be a clear framework for devolution to parish and town councils, including governance and monitoring arrangements. Obviously, most of their contact is with the Environment and Transport Department and the functions that they deliver. And we do think that we'd need to provide help with them to take on more local services. The financial model needs to reflect the member allowances issue. There was quite a bit of discussion around that, whether it would generate savings, bearing in mind the increased responsibility of members in a unitary council. Of course, we do accept that setting those allowances is outside the scope, and that would need to be done, obviously, by the independent panel to make recommendations. The transition and then transformation approach, i.e. the savings, query really whether they would be delivered as quickly as the initial Cabinet report anticipated. And then there is concern around the continued provision of non-statutory services, particularly those that would come in from the districts, and the pressure that they might be competing with statutory services like adult social care and children's, and I think particularly around things that communities hold dear, like parks and recreation and leisure facilities. We'd also like to see an external validation of the business case, which I think officers have actually already committed to. The Scrutiny Commission looked at the report on the 6th of March and was generally supportive of the report. Members didn't want any changes making to the report, but we did agree that the minutes of the meeting would also be submitted to yourself today. And these are attached to Appendix B. The main points that were raised at that meeting: general recognition of the need to change, but a view that this could be achieved in other ways, perhaps by shared services. Members felt that more consideration was needed to the two-model unitary and also of the appropriate size for a unitary authority. Recognition that the debate had caused some staff anxiety and the need for greater clarity on the impact on staff. The suggestion was made that the transition and then transformation approach could prolong that uncertainty. And then finally, Chairman, Appendix C summarises the key issues raised by the Working Party, to which you've already referred, assessed against the views set out in the Scrutiny Commission report. The majority of the issues discussed by the Working Party have been addressed through the scrutiny process. And I'll just highlight the views of the Working Party on transitional arrangements, which were not covered in the Scrutiny Commission report. The Working Party felt that the preferred option to transition to a unitary council would be a shadow executive, which would be both politically and geographically balanced. Chairman, I present the report. It's over to the Cabinet now for what you want to do next. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Simon. Thank you for taking us through your report. And if I may say, I think a very good job was done by the Scrutiny Commission and the committees, and I attended a number of those meetings, as you know. And I think they were very thorough, and a great deal of time and effort was spent in looking at the subject in a serious way. I think from the point of view of the Cabinet, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Cabinet here, is I think we've learned a great deal from that process, and especially, of course, from the visit of the two of the leaders, and the third one, of course, by the Skype link to Cornwall, about the different ways in which they'd approached it and their different experiences. As a result of which, the leader has put forward a proposal which we'll be voting on in a moment, ways to ask for a full business plan to be prepared, but to take account of the report that the Commission has submitted today, and other, of course, information which has come to us, and that be brought back again to the Cabinet in June, and then from then onwards, we'll see what we do with it. So it's been a useful process, and I think it's one which I'm glad we went through. So I'm going to propose the motion which is on the order paper. Richard, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I second that, and I think this has been a really excellent example of how scrutiny adds value. I had the pleasure of witnessing a number of the scrutiny meetings, and the learning for all of us, which emerged from those discussions and from witnesses, has been really helpful. So I would like, if I may, Chairman, to ask Simon to pass on to all his scrutiny colleagues thanks for all that work, learning about transition, for instance, and learning about the importance of the area committee that you referred to, the questioning of the witnesses. It was superb. Thank you very much indeed, and I have great pleasure in seconding the motion.
Thank you. Any comment from anyone else? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are we in agreement to pass that motion? Yes? Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon. We're now at item 6, which is concerned with the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities provision, progress with delivery of the High Needs Block Development Plan. This report specifically outlines the feedback received to date from the consultation, which is still ongoing, and the expressions of interest from maintained schools and academies. It also seeks agreement for the Director to proceed with the statutory approvals process to progress these further. The Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee received a report on the 22nd of January 2019 and will receive a further report at their meeting on the 4th of June 2019. We have with us this morning Jane Moore, Director of Children and Family Services, who will present this report. I'll then ask Ivan Old as the Cabinet Lead Member to speak. Jane.
Thank you, Chair. So the report sets out the progress of the delivery of the High Needs Block Development Plan, which sets out our development of special educational needs and disabilities provision in Leicestershire. Specifically, the report does outline feedback that we've received to date through the consultation, the expressions of interest from maintained schools and academies for the development of the new provision, but also seeks agreement for the Director to proceed with the statutory notices. So just by way of background, the background section of the report sets out the work that's led to the High Needs Development Plan, in particular how the funding's allocated, how it's spent, but also the pressure on the budget as a result of the increased education, health and care plans, responsibilities extending to 25, and the lack of local provision for children with SEN. We've set out that the projected increased demand over the next 5 years is expected to exceed 22%, and that whilst we have a range of provision already in Leicestershire that is either good or outstanding, we know that there's a requirement to increase the provision for children with communication and interaction difficulties, primarily autism, and those with social, emotional, mental health issues to meet the current and projected demands. There's also a need to ensure that provision is of high quality, it's locally placed, so it meets the needs of children and young people, but also makes the most efficient use of resources. So the plan that we've set out is intended to ensure the better use of available resources, but it also includes a significant capital investment in the development of that new provision across Leicestershire. And the fundamental driver for this change is around supporting children to be educated locally and developing an inclusive approach with educational settings to meet their needs in that cost-effective manner. So over the next 4 years, it is proposed that SEN provision in Leicestershire will be increased significantly. And with this in mind, we did issue expressions of interest in November and invited them from all Leicestershire maintained schools and academies, with a view to establishing 5 communication interaction bases and 10 social, emotional and mental health unit or resource bases across the county. The response shown by schools to the call for expressions of interest has been extremely encouraging, and it does show a real commitment to the development of that provision across Leicestershire. We did receive 30 applications. We've detailed those at the top of page 69, and we've been through a process of assessment of those applications involving a joint panel comprising of officers from the County Council, colleagues within both children's and corporate resources, head teachers and also health. In paragraph 35, we have detailed the 15 schools that were considered appropriate for progression to the resource bases. And the appendix to this report does in detail further information around those schools selected for the development of those new resource bases. And it also sets out the expected opening date, the places to be provided, and also the process that needs to be followed. So we are confident that that new provision will provide a generally good geographic spread, and you'll note from the report that we are seeking further conversation around the development of provision in the northeast of the county. So in order to progress matters and mindful that there are certain of the new provisions do need to be open in September 19, the schools identified in this appendix have been contacted to advise of our intention to progress, subject to Cabinet approval today. So as part of the High Need Development Plan, discussions have also taken place to expand a range of our existing provision, in particular our 6 special schools, and those proposals are being progressed to develop a further 125 places. So just briefly around the statutory process, there is a process to go through to both expand provision but also to build new provision. So for our local authority maintained schools, we need to publish a statutory notice, and paragraph 40 set out the requirements of that notice. For our academies, again, we need to seek consent from the DFE for significant change, and this process does require academies to undertake a period of short consultation. It should normally follow the broad timescales, but does require sign-off from the DFE. In paragraphs 42, we've detailed the successful bid for the social, emotional and mental health free school in the north of the county. We were informed by the DFE in March that we were successful with our bid, which we're really pleased with. We were the only authority within the East Midlands to receive the successful bid. The timescales for the development of the new school have yet to be confirmed, but it is expected to bring in around 5 to 8 million as additional capital investment as, for children with these SEND having an education, health and care plan. And we are now required to progress the presumption route in order to establish that new school. So just moving on to consultation, as has been highlighted, we are currently in the process of consulting around the development of the new SEND provision. So in parallel with the work that we've been undertaking to develop the provision, we have been conducting formal consultation to seek the views of parents, schools, children and others around what the provision should look, feel and operate like alongside our mainstream provision. The consultation ends on the 31st of March, but at the time of writing the report and looking at the consultations coming in, there's a high level of support for the proposals that we've put forward. We did take the proposals to the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Commission on the 22nd of January. Feedback was generally positive, a real focus on ensuring that we remain inclusive in mainstream for our children with SEN, but the committee was pleased to see the plan sought to expand our SEN facilities across the county. So just to end, the report detailing the results of the consultation will be brought back to Cabinet on the 24th of May with a view to progressing then how that informs the further work. Thank you.
Right, yes, thank you, Jane. So I'll ask the lead members to propose the motion. Ivan.
Thank you, Byron. In proposing the motion on the Green Order paper, I'd like to draw colleagues' attention to 3, I think, very important paragraphs in the report itself. First would be paragraph 26, where we explain why it is that there has been an increase in the education, health and care plans, and the fact that due to changes by the Department for Education, we now have to cater for people within the HCP up to the age of 25. And that particular paragraph gives us one of the reasons why we've brought about this more local approach to meeting special educational needs. There are insufficient local authority units. So I'm very pleased with the way that in paragraph 33, the response shown by schools has been outlined to be so positive, although we do have, as is noted in paragraph 36, at this point in time, no expression of interest from the North East Melton area, and that's going to have to be followed through. Very pleased for Jane and her colleagues who've done the work on this, that the bid for the SEMH school on the Shepshed campus was successful. I think it's even more significant. It was the only successful bid from the East Midlands. That shows the quality of the submission that was put in. And to reassure people, paragraph 48 makes it very clear that we would try to maintain children with education, health and care plans in mainstream schools wherever possible. But what is proposed in this report really makes it very clear that we will be in a much more flexible position and not have to transport children out of the county or right across the county in order to access specialist facilities. I move the motion.
Thank you, Ivan. Now, Mrs. Posnick to second the motion. Pam.
Thank you, Byron. I think this is an excellent report, Jane, and it's really encouraging to see what we're doing for young people with SEN, and it's good news all over the county. I'm obviously very saddened that there has been no successful bids for Melton area, which is my area, and a past governor of Birchwood School, which I know is very good and is well respected in our local area. So I have wish you every success with this, and I have no problems in seconding this motion on the green paper.
Right, just add some comments, because I agree with both the proposer and the seconder with theirs. I think it's a very good report. It shows now that the department's getting to grips with the situation we find ourselves in spite of the fact that the government are not funding special needs and disabilities as well as they should be through the high needs block, and we can continue to keep pressure on them to allow more money to go into that block, and not necessarily at the expense of the mainstream schools, which of course is what's happening at the moment. But I also am disappointed with the Melton area, which, they're not got a response, and everyone else has. So I hope that's communicated to the schools there. So there are two members who are not too happy with that situation. Anyway, it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments? So we all agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane. Right, we're now on item 7. Item 7 concerns the response submitted on behalf of the County Council to the consultation issued by Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council relating to the local plan review, New Directions for Growth. We've received joint comments from Mr. D.C. Bill, CC, and Mr. M.T. Mullaney, CC, Mark 7A, which are attached to the order paper. We have with us this morning Tom Pennell, the Assistant Chief Executive, who will present the report. And after Tom has spoken, I'll move the motion on the order paper. Tom.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The report informs the Cabinet of a response submitted by officers in response to Hinckley and Bosworth's consultation on this document, which is part of its local plan review. The response is attached as Appendix A, and officer comments are summarised from paragraph 21. This consultation, New Directions for Growth, is an early stage in the local plan review process. More formal stages will follow, so the County Council will have further opportunities to comment on this as it develops. It is a significant document, though, in that it's the first local plan document to be issued in the county since the Strategic Growth Plan was approved by all partners, including the County Council and Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council, in late 2018. And as you'll be aware, the SGP, the Strategic Growth Plan, provides an agreed framework within which local plans should be developed, and is an expression of how local partners have fulfilled their duty to cooperate in cross-boundary and strategic matters. So it is a significant document that we're all signed up to. I won't go through the officer comments in detail, but we'll focus on two of the key points made in the response. Firstly, concerns are expressed about the nature of the consultation exercise undertaken, including the lack of engagement with the local highways authority in preparing the document, and the leading nature of the consultation questions, in particular question 1, which deals with infrastructure issues. Secondly, the document puts forward options for distributing development which are inconsistent with the Strategic Growth Plan, but without making any reference to that incompatibility with the plan. It is recognised that the local planning authority does need to explore all reasonable options, but it is important that the strategic steer provided by the SGP is properly articulated in documents like this. I mean, I think if it isn't by all of the partners who've signed up to the SGP, there is a danger that the SGP will be undermined and its role diminished. The recommendations are as on the order paper and are to note the officer response that's been submitted and to note with concern the matters I've just summarised.
Right, thank you, Tom. Well, I'm happy to move the motion, and in particular, I think I will reiterate those comments. I read this rather carefully, and it is a pity that Hinckley and Bosworth have chosen to skirt on the verge of sort of ignoring the strategic growth plan. And they haven't quite ignored it, but as you say, they haven't drawn attention to the fact that it's their consultation isn't quite aligned to it. But I hope they will realise the error of their ways from the response that we make. Anyway, I'll move the motion and ask Mr. Payne to second. Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. And I would concur with the comments that have been made. Just taking on the representation, the submission that's been submitted by Mr. Bill and Mr. Mullaney, I note that they claim that we are the strategic planner for the area. It isn't my understanding that we're the sole strategic planner. We're party to the SGP, the strategic planning document, which we've contributed towards. And I think my point is that in order to deliver development on the ground in the future, I concur that we need to work very closely with that agreed document, and we need to enter into constructive cooperative arrangements, whether that be with the County Council as a whole and or with the Highways Department, the department which I lead. I just want to pick up on a second point, if I may, Chairman. It is particularly surprising and disappointing that it's claimed that the transport impacts in and around certain parts of Hinckley aren't as, should we say, as good as they should be. The County Council over the last 5 or 6 years has invested over £10 million in supporting infrastructure, highways infrastructure in and around Hinckley. And I think some of the tone of the questions that have been put lead the reader to imply that there is a problem where there perhaps isn't. I totally accept that it's reasonable to scope these issues out, but I just want to put on record that the County Council with its partners have worked extremely hard to invest in this particular area of the county over recent years, and I think that has been lost in translation. I will happily second the motion on the order paper. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Blake. Any other comments?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes.
Chairman, I would want to support the comments on the Green Order paper. I'd also like to thank the officers for the very balanced tone of the response that they have sent back to Hinckley and Bosworth. And I've looked at David Bill and Michael Mullaney's comments, and I quote, "Can report there has been no consultation with ourselves as county councillors for the area." Well, they're not the only county councillors who represent the area of Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council. I do, Ozzy O'Shea does, Janice Richards, Amanda Wright, and I'll probably miss somebody off the list as it's just very quickly occurred to me. To the best of my knowledge, none of us have had a briefing from the county council, but if you wrote in to the original proposals in the local development framework, you were subsequently written to by Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council and invited to comment yet again. I've done that, and I've sent copies of my objection to their plan in to officers here at County Hall. There's nothing to say that either David Bill or Michael Mullaney have done the same. And as twin-hatted people, or certainly David Bill is, they have an opportunity to influence the planning authority in a way that I, as a county councillor, don't do. I think that what I've done reflects the fact that I represent the division that I represent, and it's up to every county councillor to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Let's hope things improve as a result of the comments we make. Right, it's been moved and seconded. Is everyone agreed? Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, Tom. Right, now we're on item 8, This report seeks approval for the Environment and Transport 2019-20 Highways Capital Programme and Highways and Transportation Work Programme. The Highways and Transportation Programme is resource intensive, both in terms of staff and funding. The allocation of additional resource will ensure the department can continue to be proactive and responsive to opportunities to develop significant transport projects to support economic and housing growth. The Environment and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee received a report on the 7th of March and supported the programme. We have with us this morning Anne Carruthers, the Director of Environment and Transport, is here to present the report, and then I'll ask Blake Payne as the Cabinet Lead to speak. So, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. The report, as you mentioned, the report seeks approval for a 1920 Highways and Transport Capital Programme. That programme itself is just under £160 million over the period of the MTFS, which was one of the largest capital programmes we have had. Some of the major projects that will be carried out under that programme are set out for you in paragraph 22 of the report. As well as those, our large-scale initiatives include our highways maintenance works, the capital elements of those, our vehicle replacement programme, and work on advanced design for future schemes, and I'll come on to that again in a moment. The details of the whole capital programme are set out for you in appendices A and B, and the only bit I would draw to your attention is the reference to Zoch Bridge. That scheme has been in development for a number of years now, and because we've had to go through the whole CPO, compulsory purchase order process, and had to also redesign the scheme, our most recent cost estimates are substantially more than our earlier estimates, and we propose to bring back a future report to Cabinet on that particular scheme. The report seeks delegations to allow us to enter into contracts at an earlier stage than we previously would have done. This is for two reasons, namely the complexity of funding and the partners we're seeking funding from in many of the schemes in order to deliver them, as well as new NEC 4 contract rules that are now in operation. It means we have the ability to enter into contracts at a much earlier stage, and we call that early contractor involvement stage. And that's before the full scheme costs have been finalised or funding even secured, fully secured and signed up for that scheme. The advantage of that process is that we can work with the contractor to ensure we have a deliverable scheme. It's valued, engineered, and we have the most robust cost estimate we possibly can before entering a stage 2, which is the award of the full construction works of the contract. The final matter I would highlight for you is the £6 million we're seeking to enable advanced design on future schemes. That's two schemes in particular. The first one's the A511, A50 growth corridor, and we're looking to work up a bid to go into the major roads network pot, which will become available from 2020. The second, that scheme I would just add is the only feasible scheme within the county that we have the ability to work up the relevant detail and deliver within that funding window. The other scheme we're seeking advanced design funding for is M1 Junction 20A. We had hoped to include that in a recent HIF bid to government. However, we're advised we couldn't actually include for a number of reasons. However, what we would like to do is to bid into DFT's next round of large local majors. That's the same funding pot that we've funded the majority of the Melton Mowbray distributor road from. So that's what the advanced design funding will go to developing. The recommendations of the report are set out under item 8 in the order paper, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Now, we can turn to Mr. Payne to move the motion. Blake.
Once again, thank you, Chairman. I won't hesitate in moving the motion on the Green Order paper, all 5 parts and its subsections. But in doing so, I want to make a few comments. Firstly, I think year after year we talk about our budgetary pressures, and frankly it amazes me that we deliver so much as a department in terms of highways and transportation's given the constraints on the finances. More recently, we were invited to London to the Transport Select Committee to give evidence in certain areas of business. We raised the issue of funding, and I just want to reiterate and inform Cabinet colleagues, as I did at the scrutiny meeting more recently, our desire to see a medium-term funding position from government. At the moment, we get year settlements and grants. I'm convinced that if we were to have a 5 or even 7 year package of funding, we could programme our maintenance and our preventative work much more efficiently than perhaps we do at the moment. That said, I think we do a brilliant job under the circumstances and the framework we work to. And let's not forget the report before you identifies about £60 million worth of preventative maintenance funding this year alone. The second point I'd wish to make is it's probably one of the largest capital programmes that the department has been having to work to at £159 million. And again, we reiterated at the Transport Select Committee our desire for a consolidation of the grant pots that we bid into for these funding, because every time we make a bid, there are many hundreds of thousands of pounds or perhaps millions of pounds that are needed to scope out and flesh out the case for that bid. And sometimes we're not successful. That means those monies are essentially sunk unless there's another grant fund that comes along down the road where we can utilise that good work. So I think government could help us here by consolidating the grant pots that are on offer and making sure that the money we do invest into securing funds for future works aren't in vain. On that note, it's already been mentioned that we'll be pulling £6 million from reserves to scope out future projects that we wish to deliver here in the county, and that's a part of the recommendations. Notwithstanding the budgetary pressures that I mentioned, I ask Cabinet colleagues to support the motion because we should be extremely proud of the department's work on all fronts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. Richard, would you like to second it?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll certainly second the motion. This is, to me, clearly an ambitious and challenging programme with complexities. I applaud the ambition. This is a matter, this is a high-profile issue for members of the public. The challenges are set before us in the report and expressed by the Director and by Blake. And I support the comment that Blake made that government could make life easier and ultimately improve things for residents if we had the kind of long-term funding certainty to which he referred. So I wish all concerned in pressing that point well in pressing it further. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Any other comments? I think I would add, I mean, I'm very impressed with this report, reading through it. I mean, obviously I see quite a bit of it at different times coming forward, and now it's all together. It's an impressive document, but my goodness me, we've got a lot to do. And there's a fair bit of risk in it as well, so we've got to be very vigilant. But anyway, it's the way forward, and it's been moved and seconded. Everyone agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Right, we are now at item 9, which is about Lutterworth Strategic Development Area. So this report seeks approval to accept a grant allocation of 40 million from Homes England, which will provide funding for the Lutterworth East Strategic Development Area scheme and 3 other significant schemes in the county. It also seeks authority to enter into a contract for early contractor involvement for the design and construction of the Lutterworth East Spine Road and related infrastructure. We still have Anne Carruthers with us, but now we're joined by Simon Lawrence, the Major Programmes Manager, who will present the report. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. As you said in your introduction, the report sets out 2 recommendations required to support the ongoing development of the Lutterworth East Strategic Development Area, which is a proposal that extends to 516 acres of land. The proposed scheme for the site involves the development of 2,750 dwellings, 56 acres of employment land, 2 primary schools, a local centre, extensive open space and green infrastructure, together with the major highways works, including the construction of the new Spine Road, a new motorway bridge and substantial off-site junction improvements. And the appended concept master plan shows the indicative layout of the proposed development. The planning application for the proposals were submitted to Harbour District Council on the 26th of February 2019, and the intention is that the district give consideration to the application later this summer. So in terms of the recommendations, the first sets out or recommends the acceptance of the Homes England grant of £40 million for accelerated construction at Lutterworth and the 3 other schemes. The recommendation made on the basis that the conditions attached to the grant are considered to be acceptable to the County Council. The £8 million goes towards the Lutterworth East scheme, with the remaining £4 million allocated to housing schemes in Stibson, Sysonby Farm in Melton and Farley Way in Corn. Homes England require confirmation of the acceptance of the grant by the end of the month. The second recommendation is to authorise the Director of Environment and Transport to enter into an early contractor involvement contract for the design of the Spine Road, specifically for Lutterworth. This recommendation clearly builds on the recommendation in the previous report at today's meeting that seeks approval to enter into contracts for schemes in the Highways Capital Programme. Approval of the recommendation will allow early contractor involvement in the detailed design of the Spine Road that meets the Housing Infrastructure Fund expectations, that is, that the detailed design will be completed by the end of the year. The costs associated with the contract are estimated to be £1.5 million. Further reports that seek approval to enter into subsequent stages of that contract, as well as setting out the wider Lutterworth SDA development approach, will be submitted to Cabinet in due course.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Well, last we're beginning to move forward on this project, something which I'm very pleased about. We've done a lot of work so far in assembling the land together so that we can bring it forward, and we've got some money towards getting it moving as well as the other projects. So I move the motion on the order paper and ask Mr. Shepherd to second it.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm happy to second that motion on the green order paper. Thank you.
Any other comments? No? Are we all in favour? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 10 is the final public report today. It's to set out dates for the council meetings for the next 2 years. If everyone's happy with this, they'll be referred to the next council meeting for approval. So I'll ask Richard Shepherd to move the motion.
Chairman, a very straightforward matter. I'm happy to move the motion.
And Louise Richardson.
Happy to support.
Thank you. Any comments? All agreed? Thank you very much. We're now at item 11, items referred from overview and scrutiny. Well, there are no items to consider today. So item 12, matters which I've decided to take as urgent. So thank you everyone for attending and watching this Cabinet meeting. But our last item is the urgent exempt report, which I referred to earlier, regarding the Housing Infrastructure Fund bid for the southern section of the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road. As this report is exempt, I now move that under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves a likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 5 and 10 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is that agreed? Thank you.